Hi, my name's Chad Love with Quail Forever, and for the past few days I have been chasing quail in north central Kansas with Ben Brettingen from onX Hunts and Brett Haverkamp, who is our local Quail Forever farm bill biologist in this region. One of the reasons that we're doing this is that Ben is teaching me how to use onX to identify quail habitat and to find places to hunt. It's been a real education for me because I'm what you call an adult onset onX user. I'm a little bit older than these two guys, and so I grew up using paper maps and using the old atlases, and it took me a while to let go of that. But a couple of years ago I started using onX, and it was really a game changer for me. For one, I stopped getting lost a lot and started using it as a tool to find more spots. So for the past few days, Ben, we've been chasing some quail around some of these spots, and he's been showing me some of the tools that I can use to further my onX games. So Ben, if someone was wanting to take a trip to Bobwhite country and hunt public land like we've been doing these past few days, what are some of the key tools that you would use to find Bobwhite quail habitat and find good spots to hunt?
Yeah, so the first thing is I always start with layers. It's going to show you private land, whether you're hunting on private property, walk-in, weehaw in Kansas is a big one, and your government land layer. So that'll just show you the base of where you can be, where you shouldn't be, etc. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And just like with a lot of upland bird species, I'm really looking for areas that have densities of public land or some larger ones. Again, some of the one-off spots, right? You have one piece of land in an area. It can be good, right? It can be kind of like that late season out of the way spot, but then you're stuck with it, right? Then that's your spot. So finding those clusters of public land, and then from there, really zeroing in on each piece of property and identifying, all right, what looks like good bobwhite habitat. So Brent, from a overall perspective, really what are you looking for? What makes good quail habitat?
Good quail habitat, they're not the biggest birds, they're small and they move a lot with their feet, so you got to have some bare ground for them to run across, and then get into some thick cover so they can protect themselves from avian predators, any other predators, cold weather, get in there for some thermal cover and then get back out of it into some good food habitat without going too far. You want some good native forbs, good grass, food plots.
And then Chad, as a quail guy, I'm comparing and contrasting pheasants because that's what I know a lot of. The habitat is definitely different. If you're in good pheasant habitat, odds are that's probably not what you're looking for quail, right?
Right, yeah, so obviously I'm not a biologist. What I look for when I look for quail habitat on a piece of public property, I look for basically variety, variance. I look for sand plum thickets, I look for weedy forbs, I look for sort of vertical, brushy structure that quail can use as midday loafing cover, things like that. When I look at onX and I'm looking at the satellite imagery, I'm not good enough to interpret what that data, what I'm looking at, but I'm just looking for differences in the satellite imagery. Obviously you can identify things like brushy draws, edge cover. Bobwhites are very, very edge-oriented birds. And that doesn't necessarily even have to be like the edge of two different types of like obviously different vegetation. It could be like the edge between a ragweed flat and a piece of sand sage prairie. It's like those subtle differences are also edges as well. And so I look for things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part for people to grasp is looking at aerial imagery and then understanding what that actually looks like on the ground. So this piece we're sitting on here, you can really see that, right? It's very diverse. You can see these dark areas, and generally the darker areas, the thicker it's going to be. Cattails are going to be dark. These sand plum thickets are going to be dark, and then the areas with less grass, lighter cover, tend to be almost a lighter or whiter color. So you look here, and it's just a mosaic, right? It's everything, and again, in quail, right, are a disturbance bird.
Yeah.
Obviously, this piece has been grazed right here. You see the cattle trails going through it. So.
And that's actually a very good word to use, mosaic. That's probably the perfect descriptor of what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a piece of ground, is just a mosaic of lots of different types that create lots of different edges for quail to live.
So we're in Kansas right now. Obviously, quail spread across the United States. Let's bump down to your neck of the woods in Oklahoma. How does that change?
It changes a little bit. Like where we're hunting right now, we don't really have a lot of like sand sage prairie. But down in my part of the state, in the northwest part of the state, you know, we're dominated by sand, you know, basically sand hills, and it's rolling sand sage prairie interspersed with things like stands of native sunflower, sand plum thickets, sumac thickets, and things like that. The concept is the same. You know, it's just the actual vegetation is a little bit different. But so if you can start identifying those patterns, then you can really apply that to whatever terrain you happen to be hunting, and that's kind of the process that I use.
Yeah, and that was really interesting because, again, Brent, you can describe what we're looking at, but Chad and I were talking earlier, it's like, how do you describe why that looks good? I don't know, right? What was the term you used for it?
It just looks quaily.
Yeah, exactly, and so by looking at the map, and what really helps for me is when I'm driving around, got to be safe, but driving around and I'll have aerial imagery up and I'll look at a spot, and then I'll look at the map and say, okay, this is what it looks like, this is what it looks like on the aerial, so you can really start connecting that.
So basically I know how to like drop a waypoint and, you know, look at the satellite imagery and all that. But beyond that, I'm a little bit limited. I'm still learning. What are some of the tools and the processes that you use when you start a hunt, when you're looking for places?
Yeah, one of the big keys is waypoints, and then using colors and using icons. When I'm scouting an area, I'll drop hundreds of waypoints, just saying, hey, this looks good. And for me, it's about efficiency. So I'll generally use a color coding scheme and then an icon. So for example, we're looking for quail, I'll use quail icon, and then I have a color system that I use. So yellow is for areas that I've scouted online, never been to in person. Purple is an area that I found online, I drove by it, confirmed like, yep, this is good habitat. And then I'll use blue for either I've found birds there, I've shot birds there, I know that they're actually there. And then at a glance, I can see like, okay, these are just areas you've scouted, you've never been to, or okay, these are the spots that I've shot birds out of. So there's a note section on a waypoint. So I'll say, for example, this spot, one covey, roughly, you know, 10 to 12 birds. And then I can go back because my memory is terrible, especially, you know, you're just bopping around here. And so I'll have all that information right there. And it helps it keeps it organized for me, because if I just use a red X, like, was I looking for pheasants here? Was I looking for quail? What did I find? Did I shoot birds there? Did I find it on the internet? So, and I can use that system pretty quickly to mark spots, to say I found birds here, and then I know the difference between them.
Yeah, and that's the stage that I'm at right now, red X. And so when I looked at your waypoints on your phone, it's like, it just blew my mind. It's like, oh, there's a pheasant, and there's a quail. You can do all this. Like it was amazing. It's really cool. So
that's a big one. Another one that I like to use is the tracker feature. So that kind of helps me know where I've walked. Today we were hunting some of these big CRP fields. You kind of get lost in them, right? They're big, you don't know where you walk. So I'll turn on the bottom right corner, you hit your tracker, it'll show you how far you went, what kind of your average speed was, and then how long you hunted. So it's kind of, first off, it's kind of fun to have those stats for your hunt. And then
you can brag about it later. I walked X number of miles.
I'll turn that tracker on. And another big one I use a tracker for is when I'm actually driving around and scouting. This is a pass I took here. So let's just say, like the other day, we were all out scouting. This will help kind of show, all right, which properties didn't we look at? Like we can compare, I can share this with you. I can tap on it and hit share, and I can send it to Chad Love, and then you can see it. And okay, these are the properties we hit, these are the properties we didn't hit. So that's a very useful feature when you've got multiple people as well. Again, like I was scouting a spot when we were driving around, I can add photos to waypoints. Like if I want to picture, like, okay, there's something specific about this property that I want to remember, I can take a picture of it, attach it to the waypoint, and like fun memories, right? Like the quail we shot out here today. You can take that picture of Amos and I and put it on the waypoint and remember, okay, that's where we shot that
really
bird.
Cool. I wish I'd have known about that a few weeks ago.
And then kind of one of the last things I'll always do when coming out here is, especially in a new area, you know, we had some real spotty cell phone service this week, and nothing is more frustrating than trying to zoom in and see a piece of cover and you don't have any cell phone service and it's just blurry. So I'll download offline maps, and you can do it from the web map as well on your computer and send it to your phone, or you can do it right from your phone. And generally I'll start out in 150 mile, and that means I'll have low res, but at least I'll know where I'm going. And then from there, like the pieces of property I know I'll be hunting, I'll download them in 10 and then 5, which is the highest. Then doesn't matter if we have service, we can always know where we're going, we can always identify the habitat, and that's really helpful. So the one thing we didn't touch on is a few of the different layers too. The new crop layer that we have out has been really, really helpful for me pheasant hunting, and then also for identifying potential quail habitat. And the key is knowing the crop rotations in the area, because it's last year's data. Brent, like around this area, what typical crop rotations, what does that look like?
Yeah, further west you get in Kansas, you'll get more of the wheat milo mixture. You know, some people have soybeans, but you don't get much corn out here. You know, it's mostly wheat and milo. So, you know, if it's wheat one year, it should be milo the next, and vice versa. You know, as you work your way east across the state, you're gonna run into more soybean and cornfields. So.
Yeah, exactly. And then the key is if it's showing corn on the map or it's showing soybeans on the map, that's last year. So it's with crop rotation, it's not going to be that this year. So that's been really helpful to me, just to say, okay, yeah, I think I know what this is going to be. And obviously small grains are important for quails.
So Ben, when you're scouting an area for onX, one of the big things with quail habitat is diversity. You know, successional habitat, early, you know, late succession, big trees, little trees, grass. You know, what are the things you look for to find diversity with onX?
That's a great question. A lot of people I've talked to have struggled, like, well, how do you know this is a plum thicket versus trees? And the interesting thing is it depends on when the satellite photo was taken, but generally, like, let's say we're finding plum thickets here, it looks almost like it's just dark colored ground, like there's not, you know, it's flat, right? Where you look at trees here and see, look at that, you get shadows.
Yeah,
right?
Shadow there.
There's no shadows on the plum thickets. And you know, and then also you look at the canopy, right? Like you can kind of see it sprawling out here, versus that it's kind of like that matte look. So that's one of the big ones with especially trees, and finding the right type of trees. You know, not looking for giant cottonwood trees. Like we talked about before, just finding those clumps, right? The lights and darks, edges of fields, that kind of thing has all been important in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into those diverse areas is usually where you should find some quail.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, one of the things that I was really intrigued by that you showed me the other night is you showed me where there have been disturbances through fire.
Yep.
Quail is a bird that is very, you know, it's a disturbance bird, and so fire is something that quail hunters should be interested in terms of, you know, have there been fires in the area where they're wanting to hunt? And so you showed this to me, and if you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is helpful, and it's just nice because you know, like you said, when it burned, and then also you're planning a trip. Like, let's just say here, probably if this was a 2020 fire, you know, or 2021 fire, it's like, yeah, I probably won't go to that area. But the layers are historic fire and then active fire. So, you know, in high time in the summer when there's a lot of active fires, it'll update by the hour and show you, you know, that fire moving. But then you turn on the historic and you can see fire data. Yeah, so it's helpful. Like a spot we were driving around up north, I didn't have it on and drove through a lot of area that was just charred still. So something to help you save time as well in scouting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and fire, you know, it's a great habitat tool. You know, you get that, you clear all that thatch layer, you know, the dead grass from previous years, you know, that slows down a quail and hinders their movement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and like some of those fields that we walked today could have used a fire.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Those are just a few of the tools that I use kind of when I'm going out looking to find quail and hunt quail. So had a great time today, fellas.
Yeah, I did too. It was like we did a lot of walking, but that point on that you got with your pup, that sort of like made it all worthwhile.
Yeah,
it was really fun watching that.
Yeah, exactly. I'll have to do it again. And
yeah,
appreciate it.